in our country, white people and white culture is the default culture, but they don't recognize that they have their own culture. So when these things come up, they see other things that isn't their culture, but we're being forthcoming and telling you this is Express Yourself Black Man. This is the Whole Brother Mission. It's for Black men. This is an HBCU. We're labeling it as Black. But when white people do it, they don't label it as white. They label it as American.
Welcome back to the podcast. I started this podcast as a way to help Black men in all aspects of our lives. Studies show on average we lose 2.8 years of our life when we're under heavy stress. And I think we can gain those 2.8 years back if we express ourselves healthily. Stick with me as I interview therapists, doctors, advocates, activists, and friends about how we can be better as Black men and as a Black community. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube and following us on Instagram and TikTok, you'll definitely want to do that. Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
All right, y'all. I'm here with Maliek Blade, the CEO of Whole Brother Mission. Maliek, how you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good, man.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, bro. We've been having a lot of conversations just about the exclusive community, low-cost therapy options for Black men, how we can partner Whole Brother Mission, Express Yourself Black Man. So I appreciate you reaching out and then being open to do the podcast episode, because I think you have a lot of valuable insight, not only as a therapist, but as a Black man and as someone who's trying to be active in the space of mental health and therapy and trying to build resources and services for our community. So I just thank you for your work and just being open.
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement and the opportunity to share more about it, especially with the community you've built. It's a good space over there at Express Yourself Black Man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, bro. So can you take me into how you got started with Whole Brother Mission, how you got into the mental health field, just your story in general?
Yep. So I would say it would be two major high points for me that kind of brought mental health to my attention before I was even thinking about being involved with it directly. One is one of my closest friends, we'll just say was having some issues. And I think at the time I didn't have language for it. He didn't have language for it. His family didn't have language for it. And many of us, I think, in the Black community see certain things that might be mental health related or mental health issues, but we have our own terminology for it and our own solutions that may not be holistic. So I was peeping certain things that at the time we might have labeled peculiar or different, but we didn't know what it was.
Right.
So I would say it started with that. And then I think what really sent me over the edge, because I had already been thinking about these things because of my close friend, was before working with the Whole Brother Mission, I worked in colleges and universities. And I worked at a university in Oklahoma for a period of time. And I ended up working multiple different jobs in one role. And one of the hats that I had to wear was the dean of students for a period of time, which had to deans at colleges typically deal with discipline. If you get in trouble, you got to go see the dean. So I had to be the one responsible for discipline and reprimand when students got in trouble. And something I noticed quite a bit while I was there was, even though it was a predominantly white school, there were Black students, Black males there predominantly in the basketball and football team. So a lot of the people that went into my office were brothers. So I'm sitting there like, man, this is not a good look for us, but let me try to make the best of it.
Right.
And what I thought was, I can have an approach where we deal with the issue, but we don't just punish you for the issue, but we also set you up to succeed and not find yourself here again.
Right.
And there was one student in particular who was going through it, and he had gotten in trouble. And I remember meeting with him and some other leadership. And when I saw him, I knew that he was in defense mode. I knew he was shutting down. He didn't want to talk because he was scared. They interpreted it as him being disrespectful, not forthcoming. So they wanted to move forward with just punishment and so on and so forth. Right. But I knew he was just, I've seen that before, where you shut down to protect yourself. Where we're taught a lot of times, if you're talking to the police, just don't say nothing or wait until your lawyer's there, but he didn't have a lawyer to call on at college. So I requested that they let me speak to him privately before we move forward, and they obliged. And I spoke with him separate from them, and I was able to get a little further down the road on what was going on in his head, which turned into a series of conversations. Through some of those conversations, it came out that he was experiencing suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
He had texted his football team roommate about it and told him what he was planning to do. And his roommate texted him back and saying, I'm out with my girl right now. We'll talk about it when I get back to the room.
Mm.
So, teammates weren't really taking it that serious. And I realized, speaking with me was the first time that he began to share some of these things. So trying to be holistic and not just reprimand, that particular school had a counseling center, and we would use mandated counseling to help students.
Okay.
So because when he made the statements about the suicidal thoughts and his grades were declining, the recommendation was made, hey, you need to, or the requirement was set on him, hey, to continue, you need to go to our counseling center. So he went, and it didn't take long for them to realize that he was dealing with severe depression. That was so he was diagnosed, and it was so bad that he just had to leave school.
Wow.
So he didn't even finish the semester because it was getting that bad. So those are the two major things for me that were like, I really want to deal with how these dynamics of how we view masculinity in our community, how we view men, how women view men, don't create a space for guys to talk through when they're going through it, especially at this level. So the Whole Brother Mission actually started off as a book. I was just going to publish a book about it, but as I was going through multiple edits, I realized, I don't want to be one of those people that points the finger at Black people, very critical, without also offering solutions, especially
Right.
Black men who I think get beat down quite a bit. So the idea of the organization came because I knew that the book was going to bring up certain things, and we had to be able to point people to, now that we brought all this stuff up, here's how you can make it better.
Right.
So the book, Whole Brother, Debunk the Myth That Breaks the Black Family, was actually the inspiration for a national nonprofit, the Whole Brother Mission, which is connecting men, Black men in particular, with mental health resources and therapists nationwide. And we have at this point, over 3,000 partner counselors in our network that are servicing these men, but also we're able to service anybody that's in need of a connection. We just have that emphasis on Black men.
Right. Yeah, man. And that's so dope. When you were telling me about how many people, how many counselors you guys have in the Whole Brother Mission, and also the fact that you're able to specify helping like Black men, and that you're able to help in all states. Like I was like, dang, this is dope. This is really amazing what you're doing. And so like we were talking just now about the process, right? Everybody's like, well, why can't we just make therapy free? Right. We talk about, all these low cost therapy options. I try to offer some on the page. I try to talk about some of the free options as well. But please take people through why it is so difficult, not only to get people therapy, but why it's also difficult to make therapy free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what we're working to do. And our long-term goal is that Black men in particular and their families don't have any barriers to seeing a therapist. But as it stands, that's a tall task, and there are several barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So I could just spout them off. So one is, I think when people seek out therapy, unfortunately, oftentimes they wait to the last minute or until they're in crisis, might not be thinking as clearly. So it's just like, get me to a therapist, go.
Right.
But it's not that simple, because as it stands within our country, there is no federal licensure where someone becomes a therapist and then is able to be a therapist all over. Therapists can only practice within the states that they're licensed in.
Mm-hmm.
So you may be in need of therapy and you're in Texas, and you may know a therapist. You have a friend who's a therapist, or your friend's cousin is a therapist. So it's like, well, go see that therapist. But that person is licensed in Louisiana,
Right,
not Texas. So you can't see that person technically. I won't get into some of the alternatives, but technically speaking, you can't see that person.
Right.
So licensure is a barrier. Money is a barrier. It's expensive. So what we do with the Whole Brother Mission is we want to be twofold. Similar organizations to ours that came before us they are able to offer free therapy to people, but they then ask those clinicians to work for free. That is taking money out of the hands, in our case, of Black therapists and Black clinicians. So we want to be twofold. We want to be able to get these Black people therapy, Black men in particular, but we also want to make sure that these Black therapists are being paid for their work.
Right.
Because you don't become a therapist without doing the proper training to do that. Typically comes with degrees that typically come with student loan debt.
Yeah.
So I want to help you, but I need help too.
Right.
So
right.
it's a twofold thing where we wanted to take an approach where we're not asking anyone to work for free. Every therapist agrees to a contracted amount before they sign on with us, and we fundraise aggressively to pay them that rate so that we're serving both sides. So as I mentioned, there's licensure by state. It's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Then you look at insurance. Most people would think if you have medical insurance, that means it's easy to see a therapist. Not necessarily. So one, when we do intake calls with clients, one of the things we draw to their attention is, hey, we want to connect you with someone that's the best fit for you as a Black man with unique circumstances. And sometimes that may not be going to whoever your insurance is paneled with.
Right.
So you may be in Georgia and you may have Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance, but the local therapists in your area, if you're trying to meet in person, might all be white women. And that doesn't mean that white women can't help you, but a lot of times there's a cultural barrier there.
Yep.
So then just going to who takes your insurance may not be the best fit for the issues you need resolved. In addition to that, we look at it twofold. We want to serve the clients, but we also want to serve the therapists as well. And I'll just keep this light because I could go on and on about it. But a lot of insurance companies have a terrible track record with how they treat therapists in terms of they're building their livelihood around this, and they aren't really being paid what they ought to be paid. And in most cases, the insurance company wants to lowball them as much as possible. So even though insurance is perceived as creating access, a lot of times it can be a barrier, if not for the client, also for the therapist themselves.
Right. And that was a part where we talked about earlier that I did not know about. So I know, like, I have my therapist, and I know she has not necessarily issues with insurance, but I know she has her, like, we had we actually did have issues with insurance when I first started. Yeah. And it was just hard to kind of figure out the whole insurance situation as a client. And I know it was hard for her figuring out the insurance situation as a therapist. I didn't even know the back end to that, where like insurance providers can lowball therapists based on whatever they want to, whatever they want to charge or whatever they want to pay for per session. So it's just so interesting because sometimes when I'm looking up therapists, like I was just looking for couples therapists the other day, and I was like, damn, why all these therapists don't accept insurance? I'm like, yo, is it that hard to get like approved for insurance? And I really wanted to understand why, but now I'm understanding why, like something like just not wanting to go through that process of having to be lowballed and then also having to get approved and all that. So like, what does that process look like for therapists, like to get, to accept insurance?
Yeah. So many of them are moving in the direction. And I actually we had to explain this to someone recently who was based in New York. We have quite a few team members based in New York, but many, if not most of them, don't accept any insurance. And that's because it ends up being better off for some therapists to just get paid directly by the client. And New York happens to have a high median income where people are able to pay for themselves to go see a therapist. So it ends up being better off to just have my clients self-pay and not have to deal with the insurance company. So I'll work my way backward. In terms of the insurance, for those that have gone to therapy, you likely had to pay a copay directly to the therapist's office. That is a portion that you pay as the client, and then your insurance company will come in on the back end, most likely weeks after the session, and will then give their amount toward the cost of that session. But there is an agreement that the therapists make with the company up front about what different codes come with what different costs. But at any given time, depending on the company, they may have an excuse on why they don't want to cover a particular thing. Or there are stipulations in terms of how frequently you can see them. If, for example, you might decide, I'm going through a lot. I was seeing my therapist once a week, but I think I need to push it up to 2 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
Their insurance company may say no.
Wow.
Or they may say, you have to provide us with some severe circumstance or diagnosis that necessitates seeing this person twice a week. So there's some back and forth there that is where there's little wiggle room. But additionally, there's also this aspect of expectations on what they are going to put on the therapist. So some additional expectations they put on the therapist might be they might require the therapist, if they still want to stay paneled with them, they might require the therapist to always, or for a certain period of time, be open to receiving new clients. A therapist may be maxed out, but paneled with Cigna, and then the therapist may say, I'm not taking any new clients. But then Cigna may say, if you want to keep working with us, you got to open it back up.
Dang.
So then it's like, okay, maxing these folks out. But then also, as I was sharing with you earlier, in many cases, when you first go to your therapist and you're using insurance, that insurance company is going to ask them to give a diagnosis after that first session, which is not normal. People aren't typically able to diagnose that quickly. You want to gather more context and information, but they have to give the insurance company something to then justify you coming back. So that is through the insurance company's view, that's seen by the diagnosis. Some typically will just give you a diagnosis that is perceived as something light, nothing too severe, just to justify continuing. But depending on who it is, you don't know what they're saying. A lot of people don't know that this process is happening, that there are records being put on what the therapist believes could be wrong. But again, these are stipulations that the companies are putting on the therapist. And mind you, these insurance companies are not being run and led by mental health professionals.
Right.
So they're having to bend to the leadership of people that aren't even directly invested in client care.
Wow. There is so much there, man. Like there is so much there that I've learned in this episode and also in our previous conversation. Like I didn't know that insurance companies can basically coerce therapists to keep their availability open, even if they're not necessarily available, because there's a lot of therapists, like most of the therapists, most of the good therapists that I know are fully booked. Like they're just fully booked. And they're like literally playing around with their schedule, trying to find bi-weekly slots for new clients.
Right.
Like trying to find stuff in like maybe in their lunch hour or like after hours when they wouldn't normally take clients. Maybe if it's someone that they're like, okay, I know this person really needs help. Okay, I'll help them out. So for a therapist like that has that's paneled with like some of these insurances, because I know some of those therapists are paneled with insurances, it's just interesting to know that you could have your schedule completely maxed out and then also have the stress of having to deal with an insurance provider telling you that you need to also open it up for other people that they want to just be able to use to have that service. Wow. That's wild.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that make caring for people very, very hard.
Right, man. So, okay. So talk to me about what Whole Brother Mission is doing to kind of help in this area.
Yeah. So what we do basically, if you reach out to us via wholebrothermission.com, under the Get Help tab, you can set yourself up for an intake call. When we do the intake calls, we're basically giving you a chance to share what's been going on with you. And then we present you with a variety of options on how you can be supported through mental health services, whether that be a psychologist, a social worker, a counselor, psychiatry, or even just handing you off to someone that takes your insurance. So we're pro therapy. We're pro people talking through their issues with people that are trained to help them. Training and preparedness comes through a variety of means.
Right.
But when you do that intake call, you'll be giving us an overview of what your concerns are. And then you have the option to be connected with someone that takes your insurance within our network if someone is available. Unfortunately, there are situations where someone will reach out because it's state by state. We may have someone that takes Blue Cross Blue Shield in Texas, but we may not have someone that takes Blue Cross Blue Shield in Louisiana.
Right.
So there may be a delay there, but insurance handoffs are the first step. Sometimes people come to us uninsured and we help them with applying for Medicaid. So something practical that I love having to talk to my people about. and I mean Black people, when we come looking for support services, yes, I'm going to get to this. We do offer free therapy, but there has to be some stipulations related to that. The Whole Brother Mission is not bringing in millions of dollars as of today.
Right.
So that doesn't mean it will have to be billions really to be covering therapy nationwide, making it free for all Black people everywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But some come in with that expectation.
Right.
But I like to remind people that responsibility is on the government.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to get a little political here. Be conscious of who you vote for, because Medicaid and Medicare is what we refer people to. So, hey, if you are first in a position where you can't pay for therapy, but you know you need it, rather than putting their responsibility on the Whole Brother Mission for the whole country, no, that responsibility is on your government. Right. So they need to figure out how to provide health care for the average American. So we assist people with applying for Medicaid in their state. Right. So we'll say, hey, you're in Texas. Well, here's the link. Here's how you apply. If you have any issues, let us know. We'll help you apply. You get Medicaid, and then we can connect you with a therapist that takes Medicaid. Mm-hmm. So we're a holistic process, not just here's a therapist, but we want to help you along the way there, because most Americans aren't familiar with how insurance works at all, really. Most of us aren't.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you
want to help with that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I know you talked to me about how you guys do help with Medicaid, Medicare. What does that process normally look like for people? Like, they come in uninsured, unemployed, not really a way for them to get insurance outside of Medicaid, Medicare. I know you said you send them a link. Do most people normally, are most people normally able to go to the link, fill it out, do it all by themselves without any help? Like, how does that normally look?
Most people don't bother.
Really?
And I think that points to another set of issues. But for most people, if they don't meet the qualifications to get free therapy, and we're redirecting them to, hey, try Medicaid, most people don't follow through with it, because I think that's a gut punch to them, and they kind of give up on the process, unfortunately. Especially at the height of the pandemic, that process was delayed. Right. And then there's also the application itself is pretty exhaustive. Yeah. Because the government wants to know, well, how much money are you making? Right. Because if you're making over a certain amount, then this insurance isn't going to be free. We're going to charge you. Right. You almost, I think, you pretty much have to have zero income to get free Medicaid. And then you can go see a therapist for free. But then that brings up a whole nother set of issues. Unfortunately, Medicaid is there to cover the average American. More often than not, if you get that, you can get free therapy. But I hate to say this, but I do acknowledge and recognize when you have Medicaid, sometimes the quality of care drops. Okay. So it becomes a thing where people, unfortunately, therapists might treat a client differently based on the insurance they're bringing. And is different insurance companies affect the therapist reception different ways based off of what they're willing to pay.
Okay. So that has to go with what we talked about earlier, where it's like how insurance companies kind of lowball therapists with the amount of money that they will allow them to charge per session. So
yeah, I might begrudgingly be paneled with an insurance company just because I want to get whatever I can. Even though I know they're going to pay me super low, I just bite the bullet and I take it. So unfortunately, what happens is when you come with your whatever insurance, I know that they don't pay me well. And unfortunately, that affects the kind of quality of care the client receives because of the bad reputation of the company.
Wow.
And Medicaid is one of those.
Wow. That is wow. Okay. And I can see how that would make sense, because it's just like running a business. Like, just imagine having a client coming to your store or a customer coming to your store, and you know that this customer is always trying to lowball you. And they have a son or a daughter or whatever, right? And they're always with that son or daughter. That son or daughter never buys anything, but they're just always with them. And then that one day that son or daughter comes in by themselves, and you're just like, oh my God, they didn't even do anything. But just because they're associated, you're like, yeah, man, that's crazy. Wow. Okay.
It's unfortunate, man. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to shoulder all the problems of the world
Yeah.
and help our people out. But there's a lot of barriers there, as you can
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, when you were talking about it, I was like, you know, it just sounds like it's kind of like insurance. Honestly, even before that, like when you were talking about what you do, a whole brother mission, I was seeing some of the other like low cost therapy programs. I didn't realize how much that goes into it. Like there's real, like sitting here and talking to you about it, there's really a lot going into it. And we didn't even discuss how you pay the therapist and all that kind of stuff too. Like it's so much complexity that goes into it, man. So people really have to sit and applaud a lot of like the work that you do and a lot of other organizations in the community, because it's not easy work. It's not like you just found you create something, you run it, and okay, cool, you guys can get therapy. I know some therapists in the neighborhood, and there's so much stuff that goes. There's so much red tape and processes and procedures that you guys have to follow that makes it so much more difficult to get these services to people in our community that need it.
Yeah, and we know that, for a lot of guys, it might be a crisis moment where they're coming. So you don't want another trigger to happen, which might cause them to just tap out on the whole process.
Right.
So that's why, rather than just having an online directory of, hey, here are all these therapists, you can call them, but whatever happens after you call, that's not on us.
Right.
We actually establish a formal relationship with these partner counselors. So we're working together so that you're not just being handed off to, hey, call this number and see if they answer and try to arrange a session.
Right.
We reach out to the therapist as the organization that they're working on behalf of, and then make the connection. So there's some accountability there, rather than just having a list of numbers to call and hope somebody answers and gets back with you. Because a lot of times people call therapists, leave a voicemail, they just never hear back. So you might have been crying on that voicemail, but that doesn't move them, So
that don't pay the bills, man. That don't pay the bills. Nah, that's so true. That's so true. Like I was telling you earlier, I was looking for a couples therapist, and I sent so what I always tell people is like, first of all, if you're going to be looking by yourself, never just find one therapist and just email them and just like take the week off. Like that's not how you look for therapists. You're going to research therapists. First of all, know what you're going in therapy for, know what you're looking for in a therapist. Find that in 5 different therapists. I normally start with sending an email because I don't really like talking on the phone and all that. So I normally will send an email out. And I can just copy and paste that email. And then what ends up happening, like recently with the couples therapists, I got a response from like 3. One of them put me on a wait list. The other 2, we had a conversation over the phone. And then my girl and I, we figured out who we wanted to go with from there. But at least give yourself options so that you're not boxed in, because a lot of therapists either, one, don't check their email or their calls because they're already booked and busy with a bunch of different clients. So they're like, you know what? I don't even want to spend time looking at my emails. I have so much other stuff that I need to do in terms of like insurance, different clients that I have to figure out, notes and all these different things. So they're just not even trying to respond to emails or initial consultations. And 2, you may find a therapist that you think looks good on a directory. And then when you have a conversation with them, you're like, oh, hell no, this ain't, this ain't the one for me. So always leave yourself options, man. Like definitely always leave yourself options. And so that made me think about like, you guys basically act as like the liaison between the client and the therapist initially.
Right.
So you take off a lot of that load where I'm telling people like, hey, this is how you do the research, all that. Like you guys make it so easy. At least the way I see it right now is like you come in, you have a conversation, 15-minute, right? A 15-minute. How long is it actually?
Yeah, it'll typically be 15 minutes at the most. And you just kind of give an overview of what your concerns are, what you're looking for. You can say, hey, I am going through depression. I am looking to speak to, I'm going through depression due to a divorce. I'm looking to speak to a Black male therapist over 40 that has dealt with divorcees before. Like you can give those kinds of specifics, and then we'll do our best to get you as close to what you're looking for as possible.
Yeah, that's definitely dope, man. That's way better than scrolling through Psychology Today and trying to read through profiles. I know you know what I mean, man. Like sometimes you sitting on Psychology Today, it's like a Google search, like, man, you on like the 5th page of therapists in your area. And you're like,
it's not updated a lot of times. The numbers are disconnected. So you're going to call and that office phone don't even work no more.
Man, like with COVID, all these different people have career changes, and man, the things is just not even updated, man. So okay,
Right.
so you talked earlier about like your process for like partnering with counselors.
Mhm.
What is that like? What do you guys normally look for, and like how do you guys normally handle that? So like, let's say I'm a new counselor, I want to get partnered with Whole Brother Mission. What does that look like for me?
Yeah. So it's twofold. So one, there are certain people that are invited in based on their profile or area of expertise or training, or
Mm,
based on the need. So we may look up and say, hey, we're having a lot of people in Illinois that have Cigna insurance, and none of our therapists in there take Cigna right now. So we need somebody to take, it might be
mm,
based off of that
mm,
or some other expertise. So people are invited in. But then the other option is, if you're listening today and you decide, I do want to help service that area, I have a heart for Black men or Black families, you can reach out to us to become a member. The process is a bit different for those that are invited versus those that reach out, but the end result is the same, being a part of the network to service the clients as they come.
right. And so how would somebody reach out? Let's say a therapist is listening, which is there's probably a bunch of counselors and therapists that are listening right now that are like, okay, I want to get partnered. I want to help out too. How would one of those counselors,
Yeah,
therapists reach
just
out?
visit us at wholebrothermission.com, contact us tab. Just fill it out, let us know that you're interested, and you'll be we can start the process. There is a review process. Now, I'm gonna say up front, everybody doesn't get approved.
Okay.
There
Mm,
has to be some type of vetting and consideration of what the needs are at the given moment. But just as a heads up, obviously tax paperwork needs to be filled out, and there's need to be review of licensure and credentials and so on and so forth, and interviews as well.
right.
So all those things are to be expected as part of the process. Not everyone gets approved, but everyone definitely has the opportunity to apply.
Right. Okay, that's dope, man. I love that you guys like really have a strong vetting process, because I think a lot of times people just assume that this is like organizations like yours just kind of, all right, everybody just come, and I know you guys
Yeah.
have good intentions. So yeah, your therapist, all right,
Mm-mm.
cool, we'll work with you. And then sometimes that can compromise, like you said, the quality of the service, because not
Yeah.
everybody has the same level of experience, the same level of expertise, same level of care, right? And so when you want to make sure that you're giving the highest quality, like, service to clients that are coming in, right? And
Yeah.
the best way to do that is through a vetting process like you have.
Yeah. And cultural competency is important. So that's something that we look at. But also, I was quoted, I forgot what platform I was on, but I, as a CEO of a nonprofit for therapy, I've said there are terrible therapists out there. Not every therapist is a good therapist. Like, I think the assumption is, oh yeah, you must be. Well, no, you can be well-intentioned, but bad at your job,
Absolutely.
And even to go even further, licensure and degrees doesn't mean that you're going to have a good experience or that this person is even good at what they do. I'm a bit frustrated with how many times I've been told this exact same story. Hey, I'm coming to you guys because I was told you can connect me with a Black therapist. I've been trying therapy, but I went to the one my insurance told me to go to, and it was a white woman. And it was good for a while, but one of two things always seems to happen.
Mhm.
Either she starts crying while I'm sharing,
What?
and it feels awkward. Yeah, I've heard that way too many times.
What?
So either the therapist is crying or they're just agreeing with me about everything. Every session is smile and nod, and you're not even really contributing. Again, it's a business. At the end of the day, it's a business too. So we're
Yeah.
very realistic about the fact that some people are in it for the money.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Some are invested in you coming back, so they're not really trying to help you to heal. So these are all things that
Mm.
we consider as well that play a part.
No, that's true, man. Like, because when you think about it, it's interesting, like looking at it from a therapist perspective. A good therapist should understand that my job is to help this person heal, regardless of how much profit or money I can make off of them. I want to make sure that they can heal as quickly, as safely, as possible, right? And that also comes with the fact that also comes with some kind of stipulation, which is like, well, if they get to the point where they heal enough, they don't necessarily need to be seeing me as often, which can affect my profits. But I feel like a good therapist should be able to make that distinction. Like, okay, that's okay. I will find another client, blah, blah. But what you say is like, yo, that's some therapists aren't like that.
Yeah.
And then there's another part that you talked about with the crying. That is wild.
It hit me too when I realized I've heard this way too many times. And I haven't had that experience. I've actually never been to I had a white male therapist at one point. He didn't cry. He was good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, man, imagine. And one guy in particular, he said, it made me ask myself, am I that fucked up? That's what he asked himself because the therapist is crying.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what it is though? You know what I think it is? I think what it is that like, I think not all white people, but a lot of white people grow up in this bubble, right? And so they just don't understand
safety.
Right. They don't understand the nuances of the Black experience. So when you get a Black client that's literally pouring his heart out and being vulnerable about some of the things that he experiences, it really shatters that, like it shatters that bubble, that box that they live in. And you can't help but cry because like, damn, I didn't even know you was going through all this. Whereas you and I, like, if you tell me something that's maybe happened to you in childhood or something like that, or now I can relate or resonate in some way, shape, or form. I may not have experienced it directly, but I can understand the nuances of your experience because I'm Black and I'm also a man. So I think it's a lot different. And I talk to guys all the time on the page, through DMs where we talk about how, I started with a white therapist, man. I changed to a Black therapist, man. Changed my life. Changed the whole way. I'm like facts. That's what I tell y'all all the time. Like
that's how it goes.
I didn't even bother when I was first looking for a therapist. I was like, hell no, I'm not even looking for white people at all. No offense, bro. But it's like, why would I sit down and share
the most personal aspects of yourself?
You get what I'm saying? Why would I do that with a person that I don't feel like can identify with that? When that's supposed to be one of the biggest parts of your job is identifying or being able to empathize with me so that you can help me to move forward with my healing process. If you can't really do that, then there's already a block there. And there's already enough blocks when you first start therapy with someone new, even if they're Black. Like there's a lot of people that when they first start therapy, they are a little bit apprehensive, especially in the Black community, when it comes to sharing intimate details about themselves because they feel like it will be used against them. It may have happened in the past. They may have seen it happen with someone else. So they assume in therapy, even though, they're protected by patient, client confidentiality, they just assume just because of some of their experiences that they're not going to get that level of care because that has not been shown to them in their past. So they come in with that apprehensiveness and it takes a few sessions over time. So I can't imagine doing that with a therapist that doesn't identify with the Black experience. So that's why I always tell people, listen, bro, don't even waste your time. Like I'm sure there's some good white therapists. I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't. But you're probably going to spend more time with them, and it's probably just going to add an extra layer of complexity there, where you can find someone that's Black that will really, I feel like, provide the same level of care, if not better, just because of the fact that they can relate to you and your experiences.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah. And we have some white therapists on our network. It's all about the right fit for the right time. I know one supporter of ours, a big mental health advocate, Charlemagne the God, he'll regularly talk about how he wants to speak to a therapist of a different experience than him. So I think he said he was seeing an Asian woman at one point. Because at that point in time, he wanted someone outside of his experience that isn't used to hearing certain things, to really give some perspective. So there's a space for that, but I think as this is a new conversation for us, most of us are at the point of getting in the door, actually speaking, and feeling understood. Right. So more often than not, that has you in a spot where, hey, you might want to start with somebody Black. Absolutely. More in particular, a Black male.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think about it like this: like, if I was going to a party, right, and the first person that opened the door was like white, I kind of would feel a little bit like, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I should be here. But if I go to,
representation matters.
right, exactly, right? Like, but if I'm going to a party, the first person to open the door is a brother or sister, I'm like, all right, cool. Now I'm in there, I feel more comfortable. And then I start walking around, I see a white person here, I'm like, okay, it's all right. I still feel comfortable. So I feel like, yeah, you absolutely made a great point there. Like, sometimes it is good to have those conversations with other therapists, but I think that comes later down the line. Like you would have to, No, go ahead.
And I would go even further to say, I want Black people to have the freedom to not have to explain what you just explained. Because everybody out here does it, but for some reason, when Black people want to work with Black people, or you want to buy Black or bank Black, it's like, well, what's that about? And it's like, nah, like we all as humans, I think, try to establish a level of camaraderie and find comfort and familiarity. Everybody does it, but for whatever reason, Black people have to explain themselves. Like folks out here having to explain Black History Month. But regardless, I think that that's really important for us to understand that we have every right to do that.
Yeah.
And we're not in the wrong for that. It's not prejudice. It's not racist. It's me looking at what would best suit me in my healing process. And part of that starts with, someone that understands me. And I think when we just, in general, look at America's history, we don't have the best track record in terms of understanding and empathy across the lines of race.
Right, man. I'm so glad you said that, because that's what I was just doing. I'm explaining, like, this is the reason why we do it.
So they don't think,
right. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, like they don't think I'm racist for saying that I want to work with Black people. I feel comfortable with That's crazy. That's really wild when you think about it, that we're really conditioned to think that it's a problem for us to be united. Like, because that's really essentially what it is.
Right.
Like, it's a problem for me to say that I prefer to work with Black people, or prefer to spend my money in a Black business. Like, wow.
I'll tell you, as we've scaled, I spoke to another gentleman who had a much larger mental health organization that when it first started, it was Black male focused. And then he began to experience what I've experienced too, is there are people that want to support, and they're typically white people, but it's like, hey, could you broaden it up? Could you not be so narrow? And you get those types of things. Yeah. We'll support if it wasn't so Black.
Basically, yeah.
And this gentleman ended up getting millions of dollars for scaling. And he told me, he just said, brother, I had to go with the money. So even though it was Black focused at first, it's not anymore, but it's much larger and beyond scaled. So, and that worked for him. But I've had to have those conversations too about, like, this is intentionally meant to be focused on Black men and their families, because we need that in particular. We need a certain level of care and understanding. So I'm here for our people in particular, but I can say that many in similar spots are constantly being confronted with, hey, could you just broaden it up? Could you make it appeal to more people? Why got to be so Black?
Yo, what's interesting? Like, I don't have like VC or like investors or anything like that tell me that, but I'll get the occasional DM here and there where I'll post something and they'll say Black man, blah, blah, blah. And then someone would say, hey, this is applicable to all men. I'm like, okay, yeah. You're like, yeah, and it's a white, normally it's like a white person or something like that feels entitled to tell me that. And so they're like, yeah, I just wanted to let you know that it was, it was applicable to me and blah, blah. And so I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. Great. I'm glad it resonated with you. Then I get a DM a couple of days later and like, hey man, I'm just letting you know your content is applicable to all men. So I just want to let you know that, maybe you can, like, and it's basically the same thing. It's like, yo, broaden it up, man. make it available for me as well. And it's like, nah, y'all have a lot of stuff that y'all, like a lot of resources that y'all can go to. You don't need to come to Express Yourself Black Man and tell me to broaden up the community, because I'm not doing that. I'm not. Yeah, I'm just not.
I've said it this way before. In our country, white people and white culture is the default culture, but they don't recognize that they have their own culture. So when these things come up, they see other things that isn't their culture. But we're being forthcoming and telling you, this is Express Yourself Black Man. This is the Whole Brother Mission. It's for Black men. This is an HBCU. We're labeling it as Black.
Mhm.
But when white people do it, they don't label it as white. They label it as American or normal.
Right.
So
Right.
they don't recognize that they have their own culture too.
Damn. Yo. Man, this has really been a really good episode, man. This has been a really good episode. Please, okay, so please tell me where you're trying to go. You talked about it a little bit earlier, but just remind the people where you're trying to go with Whole Brother Mission. What the plan is long term.
Yeah, because of the need, whether it be family dynamics that are an issue because of decisions we made, because I believe in personal responsibility, or whether it be issues that are societal, racial, systemic, that we had no control over, but they still affect us, whether it's personal or not personal. There's an overwhelming evidence for us needing services like these. In addition to negative circumstances that necessitate therapy, therapy is also something that's beneficial just in general in terms of maintenance. So you don't have to work out your muscles if your muscle is starting to deplete. You can just work it out to maintain it or to build it.
Right.
In the same way, my hope is that it becomes a part of our self-care, just like trying to eat healthy, working out, going for a jog. Talk through these things. And sometimes it may not have to be with a licensed professional counselor. Sometimes it might be with your uncle or your dad or your friend, but talk about it. And if it needs to be with a therapist, because unfortunately, sometimes we don't have families or friend groups or circles where we can be supported in that way. Or we got people around us that'll tell us the wrong thing. So you got to step outside of your circle, and maybe the therapist is the way to do that. So because of all those factors contributing to why this is important, the long-term goal is to remove any barrier for a Black person, in particular Black men, seeing a therapist. So we want to make it so that we can be the hub where, hey, if you're Black in America and you want to see a therapist, we're going to find a way.
Right.
You will not have the excuse, I can't afford it, or there's no one that I can see. So that's the long-term goal, is to remove completely any barrier from a Black person seeing a mental health professional.
Absolutely. I love that. And I'm going to ask you this last question. I'm just interested. You talked a little bit about politics earlier and government and how the government has a big role to play in a lot of this, and specifically removing a lot of those barriers, because in order for you to do that, you would have to raise a lot of capital. And from what you've been telling me, in order to raise a lot of capital, you'd have to kind of go another direction, which would kind of be detrimental to what you're trying to build. Very true. have you ever thought of dang, maybe I may have to get into lobbying politicians, or lobbying votes and things of that nature, just get into politics or government at all?
You mean taking on a political role?
Not necessarily taking on a political role, but kind of lobbying the community around, making sure that we can get the necessary votes, bills, politicians, senators, and stuff
to
like that,
support work like this.
Right.
Yeah. Vaguely, because I'm originally from Washington, D.C. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. Okay. The bad side of that is I am aware acutely of the ugliness of politics. And how even we spoke about white investors wanting you to broaden the message, politics is a dirty game too. And while there is political capital from saying that we're doing this for Black people, we care about Black people and all that stuff, there is some compromise, I think, that typically comes with that type of support or advocacy or lobbying. So as it stands right now, we're trying to build things in such a way that we are self-sustained, so we don't have to compromise the messaging, and can still speak to certain issues related to the Black community. Because when it comes to politics, the money is there, but there also is typically some strings attached, like compromise on your messaging.
Right.
So we don't want to have to compromise our messaging at any point.
Absolutely. I love that. So please tell the people where they can find you, how they can support all of that good stuff, your social medias and all the things. Please
visit us at wholebrothermission.com and consider multiple ways of supporting. So of course you can give or donate via our website, but even if you aren't able yourself to do that, here are some additional ways that you could support. So one, if you are employed, check with your employer to see if they do matching donations. A lot of employers do matching donations. So whatever employees give to a certain organization, the employer will match that. So now you've doubled a contribution to the Whole Brother mission. Spreading the word to people, of course, is a huge thing so that other people are aware. So even if you can't give, you might know someone that can. So I think those two things are major pieces as well, because for some, it might be like, well, I'm struggling. I agree with you. I support you, brother, but I can't, that's fine. I know some people are there, but just your circle, your word of mouth, and your employer potentially could do more to support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maliek, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all the insight and everything that you're doing with Whole Brother Mission, man. I wish you the best.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yo, I'm excited, man. We're currently building the exclusive community, and it's going to have so many dope features. We're partnering with a Black organization to offer low-cost therapy to each member of the exclusive community. And when I say low cost, I mean that members will be able to get therapy sessions for less than $50, regardless of who they are and where they are. We're also going to have free ebooks and courses, including both the Hurting to Healing ebook and the therapy ebook I'm currently writing, live podcast episodes where you'll be able to interact with the guest and I in real time, community forums, exclusive merch, and categorized content so you can easily find information that may be useful to you. So go to expressyourselfblackman.com/therapy and register for early access. It's literally a 30-second process. I just need your name, email, and social media handle to make sure you get access before anyone else. And before I dip, I just want to thank you for your support. Without people like you, none of this would be possible. I can't wait to see you when we launch.
Sometimes I know you feel like you ain't got nobody to speak to. A shoulder to lean on somebody you could preach to. No, you need to hear it, my brother, I love you. We got way too much to live for.